Welcome, everyone. Today, we are very excited to welcome guest Jamee Pineda, who is a queer, non-binary, and trans practitioner of Hilot Binabaylan and Chinese medicine. He is based out of Baltimore, Maryland, and practiced Chinese medicine and Hilot, including Kilu Basa, to help balance elemental energies. Tawa's divination and Atang connection with ancestors through food ritual. He also hosts practitioners of all ancient healing modalities in his podcast, Decolonizing Medicine, demanding equity in healthcare and healing work through financial and physical access, anti-racist and anti-colonial activism, and empowerment of traditional medicines. So welcome, Jamee.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and with you all in this conversation.
Yay. Hi, Jamie.
So Jamee, tell us, what is the most beautiful thing about you today?
I'm really into my eyebrows.
Yes.
And my skincare. I'm just going to plug these two products. I'm totally not being sponsored by them at all, but Live Tinted. Have you all seen
Yes.
them?
I follow them.
So Live Tinted is founded by a South Asian woman who does a lot of makeup for folks who are more melanated, who have darker skins. So I use one of their products for, I think, what is it called? I can't remember the name of it right now. I'm totally blanking on it, but it's their sunscreen / moisturizer / primer. That has no white cast on it. So if you're wanting like a mineral sunscreen without a white cast for darker skin, check that out. And I also use Kinlo. I mix the two of them. Kinlo's by the tennis player, Naomi.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a new one.
Yeah. So
and
she.
Is it a foundation that you're wearing, or what is it? A moisturizer?
It's also a moisturizer / sunscreen.
Oh.
So that one is like, it's also a no white cast, but it's got a darker hue to it. That's like what my skin looks like in the summertime. It's not what my skin looks like right now, because it's still like snowing occasionally in Baltimore. So I've been mixing the two of them. I'm like in between the two shades right now.
I do the same, actually. I do 3 right now, and then that's so smart because it's like you phase one in and fade the other one out, and yeah. So I'm curious to hear more about your eyebrows. Was there a story about what makes them your favorite feature, or growing up, if it's something that you really attached yourself to, or is it something new that you've kind of come to really love?
Well, people in my family, like particularly on my dad's side of the family, and me and my sisters, we all have like very thick eyebrows. And growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, like I was born in 84, so my eyebrows were like cool for like 6 years, and then the 90s hit and everyone was like plucking the shit out of their eyebrows. So hair on anyone who's not perceived as a man is like a big deal. And it was super traumatizing to have a hairy body, which is so strange because we're mammals. We're supposed to have hair. That's like a defining characteristic.
It's a protective thing too.
Yeah, it's a protective defining characteristic. So it's been cool to like reclaim just having big bushy eyebrows, like fluffy eyebrows. Now that beauty standards have like caught up to like how glorious body hair can be. So I'm into it.
It's so funny because I was checking out your Instagram the other day and I came across this post, and that's the first thing I noticed. Well, the makeup, I was like, oh, Jamie and I wear our makeup in a very similar way. And then the eyebrows, because it was brushed up, and I was like, whoa, I've never noticed like how beautiful the brows were. And I don't have a lot of eyebrow hair. I mean, I don't think I've always had like kind of baby hair. And so I'm like jealous of people who have like these big, thick, bushy brows, but I'm also not a wood elemental archetype. So that's another thing. Like I'm jealous.
That's another thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I use I'm like plugging all these products now because
Jamie, are you
I'm like
sure
such
you're
a
not
nerd.
like getting some sponsorship here? Getting some sponsorship here?
I should. I hope that I do get sponsorships from this,
Yeah.
from plugging all my favorite products. But I use Patrick Ta's brow laminator. And Patrick Ta is also Asian. So the products that he makes are like really good for Asian hair, like Asian eyebrows, because my
Oh.
eyebrows are like super straight and stubborn. It's like the straightest thing about me is like my hair. But like normal like eyebrow soap or eyebrow gel, it doesn't work. Like my hair's too wiry.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I gotta get my products from like actual people of color or like actual
Mm.
Asians
Right.
Yeah.
That know how
who
to
know what it's
formulate.
like. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's so funny because okay, so I have like some shame around this, but I bought all this makeup because I went to work in Portland and there's no sales tax. So of course I went to hit up Sephora, Target. I'm like, get all my products. And then COVID happened and I didn't wear makeup, So I had all this like NARS and Christian Dior stuff and I just kept it in my closet. And 2.5 years later, I'm like, I think I could still wear this. And I even put on Instagram, like, does makeup expire? And everyone's like, don't use it. And I'm like, I think I'm okay. Used it. My skin is so screwed up now
Oh
to the point,
no.
yeah, you guys don't do expired makeup. But like coming from immigrant family, you don't throw anything away and you always stock up on stuff, and even if it's bad, like the vegetable you bought is bad, you just cut off a little bit, you eat the rest of it, that's just the mentality that I was raised in. But my skin was just freaking out, painful. And so I've been working a lot about like beauty and honoring my beauty, reclaiming my beauty. And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm going to invest in like skincare, Korean products, the whole 9 steps, 10 steps, whatever. Try it, see if it works. And I grew up with that with my grandma, and there's a lot of like like I have a lot of hesitations around that. Before that, like, don't judge me, but my skincare was literally just like wash with soap and put on moisturizer. I'm not like a skin person, but I've been using Page's gua sha and cupping, and there's something very like, I don't know what the word is. It is beautiful, but like just like loving to do this to myself every single night. And now that I have no choice because my skin is freaking out, it's painful. It's been like a really beautiful ritual. And so I think it's really important because I've never bought products that were made for Asian people.
Mhm.
And it's so different. Like it
Yeah.
felt different right away. I was like, oh, it's not stingy. It's not like like it's actually very gentle.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like, Jamie, you really found, your core products that are compatible for you and your heritage. And
Mhm.
speaking of your heritage, I'm curious what your history has been with beauty growing up as a Tagalog person and the other identities as queer, trans, and non-binary. If you want to share some of that insight, I would love to hear about it.
Yeah. I will say, like, I grew up in Southern California for at least the first part of elementary school. I was in a school that was very white dominant.
Mhm.
And there was still like it was like very white culture in a lot of the town that I lived in. And so that's what I internalized as being the beauty standard, is like blonde hair, blue eyes. That's what I grew up thinking was ideal. Like the people that I was attracted to were also like blonde haired, blue eyed, thin,
Mhm.
like all of these things. And I remember hearing from, like aunties, like, don't go out in the sun. Why are you swimming outside? You're gonna get dark. Like that inherent, it's not inherent, but it's like it's a learned racism, a learned anti-Blackness
Mhm.
in how we perceive beauty and how we perceive worth. So that really took a lot of time to unravel for myself. I think I didn't start questioning that more until I was in college. So like late late teens, early 20s. And then even beyond that, even now, I feel like I'm still trying to unlearn some of those. Yeah.
Were you still in California for college?
No. Well, I went to UC Davis for a year, and then I transferred to the Evergreen State College, which is in Olympia, Washington, about an hour south of Seattle. And that was shocking. The campus there, at least when I went to school, was super, super white, like even more white than some of the areas I was in Southern California. And that I will say I have probably experienced the most racism in Washington State, in a place that's supposed to be super progressive and blue or whatever.
Evergreen especially is
Evergreen
known as a super
especially.
liberal school.
Yeah, exactly. It's supposed to be very politically left, and in some ways it is, and in some ways it's like it's just white. It's white, and it's like by default perpetuating white supremacist standards.
In a weird, like, I feel you, because like I went to school in Portland, Oregon for acupuncture school. And that is, again, known as this really super progressive liberal city. But I had never in my life experienced so much racism and ignorance. And just, it was a different kind of white culture that I had never seen before.
Right. And
Yeah.
it
so screws you with your mind.
It makes you, it made me, it was like long-term gaslighting while I was going to school there, because I went there for my bachelor's degree, and then I also went back for my master's in public administration. So I was there for several years. And what like really messed with my head is that academically, intellectually, people were saying things that sounded very politically aligned with my own values, but then in practice, not so much.
Yes.
So was this also an affluent community?
I mean, I wouldn't say Olympia as a whole, like as a city, is super affluent, but it's still folks that like, it's still a college campus. It's still, there's like enough affluence or some kind of privilege to be able to be there. But it's a state school, so it's not a private institution. But this is like the time in my life when I also started dating and exploring my sexuality more. This is also like me going on dates with like a lot of like white people asking me stupid shit like, can you read this menu at like a teriyaki joint?
Oh God. Oh my God.
Oh man. And then during this time, were you also exploring your gender identity as well? And was that influencing how you were seeing yourself in terms of beauty?
That was definitely starting in college. I think that like I didn't come to full realization until a few years after college, because I literally just didn't have the language for it. So as I was going through college, it was still the more accessible language was still very binary, like was still like M to F, F to M, like trans woman, trans man. There wasn't really there wasn't really a lot of other language that I was coming into contact with, and none of those identities really quite fit. So I just assumed that that wasn't me, that I wasn't trans.
Right.
Even though things felt a little bit off, like as far as being perceived as a cis woman.
And so since then, from college and now, where are you based? You're based on the East Coast now.
Yeah, I'm in Baltimore now.
Baltimore, that's what I thought. How has this evolution of beauty from your perception, how has it evolved, and like how do you define beauty today?
Well, so maybe you are familiar with this place, Tamsin, because of where you live right now, but one of the key memories I have from living in Olympia was like going with friends to the Korean spa in like in Tacoma, like Lakewood area. And for folks who've never been to a Korean spa, it's like you go in, you're like totally naked, and everyone's naked. Everyone's using like the like hot bath and then the showers and all of the different like special mineral rooms and stuff. And that was like one of the first experiences that I ever had, being with a bunch of people just like completely naked, like in a very like ordinary setting, like non-sexual, like it's not even like intimate. It doesn't even feel intimate when you're doing it. It just feels novel. If for me, it felt novel when I was when I was there. Just because everyone was so chill. And
right. And no one's like peeping on other people.
yeah, no one's being weird about it. Everyone
Yeah.
is just so chill, and it's like not a big deal. And I just like remember having my mind blown with like how different everybody's bodies were. I mean, from when everyone's clothed, yeah, everybody's different. And then you see them with their clothes off and you're like, oh no, everyone's really different. Like flesh is in all kinds of places, in all kinds of shapes, in all kinds of sizes. And it was very, like it was like, you know, accidentally a very transformative experience. Not that I was like lurking, staring at everyone, but just being in the environment where folks are just comfortable in however they are in that moment. They're just comfortable doing their thing, like shampooing their hair, whatever. And it was very healing for me. It was very healing to be in a space where there wasn't any body shaming, especially in a space that's like surrounded by other Asian people. Just because like in my family, people made lots of comments about other people's bodies. I'm not saying that doesn't happen like in like Korean culture, but it just in that particular space that wasn't present. When I was in when I'm hanging out with my family, like folks will immediately say if someone has gotten fat, if they've lost weight, if they have bad skin, like there's like no filter.
Yeah.
And my relationship with that has gone back and forth with the no filter thing, the comments. Because on the one hand, it's like very intrusive. Because like no, you know, like you don't, that's not your place to say things about other people's body. Like that's fucking rude. And then on the other hand, it's like there's something refreshing about just like feeling so free to express yourself in a way. Like I don't know, like they seem opposing, but I also like appreciate when someone will just tell me their opinion rather than hide it or be subversive in a different way.
Yeah. I think in Asian culture, it's very much like blunt. And I think as a Koreans are very expressive how you look, like random people at the grocery store or whatever, you know? And I read somewhere that they were saying that it's like a cultural thing. So it's less about, at least with the Korean culture, this is what this person who lives in Korea said, that it's like a sign of like care, like, oh, you gained weight, oh, you're a little fat, you know, like these things are a way, the cultural way to say like, I care about you enough to say this to you, you know. And to me, as somebody that's Korean American, I was born and raised in this country, it's so hard for me to wrap my head around that. And then I think about like just the implication of Korean culture, where there's, you know, plastic surgery it's one of the main places to get plastic surgery, even the skincare stuff, it's very like superficial beauty. And so yeah, I just it's hard for me to, is it really because you care about me, or is it really because you're mean?
I think there is some, I mean, with you look at the generational play in it too, like I think there is some affection behind it. There's this like really great family story of my mom's auntie. We went to a funeral and my mom's auntie yells from across the burial. She's like, Susu, you came so fat. And like like it was just so like my mom's Chinese family, you know. But it was like that moment I was in middle school, and I just remember like it really imprinted in my mind. And I mean, it was hilarious for me as a middle schooler, but I also feel like if we looked back on history, I haven't done the research on it, but I'm sure it did come from initially a place of like, you look healthy, or you must be fed well, you must be happy. And then the reverse, if you're very thin, it might be like, oh, you must be tired. Are you working too hard? You're not getting enough nutrition. But I think since then, and then also when sometimes it moves into like a different language, like from Mandarin to or Cantonese to English in my family's case, it comes off like very like, oh my God, you just said my mom came so fat. Like, versus like in Mandarin or Cantonese, it might be like, oh, you're a like cute chubby face, or you know what I mean? Like it's gonna be different in the original language. So anyway, I don't think it's like it makes it any better for people that it really affects, but I also consider like the historical context of it and like what our three different cultures all went through, where those comments may have meant something more than just now, where it might be like, oh my God, that's so superficial, or that's so mean, or like leave my body alone, or leave my pigment alone, what have you. So
Yeah,
anyway,
even weird
just
comments like your head's really big, or like like things like, what am I supposed to do with it then? Like, oh
Yeah.
well, this is a good segue to this concept of desirability. And it's something that I've been thinking about. Is beauty connected to desirability? What is desirability? And in the last year or two, I've been really working on, and Jamie kind of knows this, that I've been working on like sensuality and intimacy. And I think, and you talk about desirability, Jamie, too. And so I was thinking like, this must be all tied in with me. I still don't have a full understanding of it for myself, but I'm curious to know, is desirability and beauty connected for you?
I think so. I don't know if I can speak to anyone else on this uh on this topic, but I think that for myself, there's something very powerful about learning how to desire myself,
I was just thinking that too myself. That's
which is,
literally, yeah.
yeah, I think that's hard. I think it's really hard to desire yourself and then be the person who you are dressing up for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's obviously not the only way to experience desire, but I was just, when I was reading through the questions for today, I was trying to define for myself, like, what is beauty? I mean, yes, like there's an aesthetic appeal, there's that pleasure that we associate with beauty, but if we're thinking of beauty as an adornment for our bodies, as like sacred containers for our spirits, I think that takes it to a whole new level, because you're not trying to appeal to a beauty standard. Beauty standard is not the same as beauty.
Right.
Like if we're adorning ourselves, understanding that we are, like fleshy divine beings, like that can be really a form of, it can be a form of liberation, it can be a form of self-love, it can be a form of resistance. I mean, how powerful is it for someone to like own their hotness just walking down the street? For some of us, that's like fucking dangerous.
Right.
Like our beauty is really powerful, that a lot of other people try to suppress that, or to own it, or to control it.
Right.
Yeah. Wow, that's so powerful. That it is, it can be very dangerous for certain people. And that's why we have so much violence against certain groups
Yeah.
of people,
Yeah, like
because
straight
they're
up
owning their
femicide.
beauty. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, even if you're not owning your beauty, you can be experiencing violence.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when people perceive your beauty as something to control,
Mm-hmm.
or just you as a person. Like it doesn't even have to be about beauty. It's like when someone seeks to control you and to oppress you and suppress you,
Yeah. And it's funny because, sometimes when people just come in like, look, I look cute today. Like, I love how I look today. Some people perceive that as like, oh, they're really egotistical, or they're very narcissistic. It's like so not normal. But talking shit about yourself, saying, oh, I look so ugly today, or I look so, that's normal. And people find that normal. And I find that so strange. And I was having a conversation with my, well, we're not friends anymore, but, you know, about this, because I love when people come in and like they're just loving themselves and telling me why they love themselves and just have that like swag about them. And that to me is like something I'm working so hard on. So when I meet other people like that, it's like, wow, like this is what I'm aiming for. And this other person just really didn't like that. They just thought it was very like egocentric and da da da. And to me, I was like, but yeah, I don't know. I love Leos too. So I love fire signs.
Well, I think that there's an aspect of beauty that is, I mean, not that beauty is only like a visual experience, but it there's inherently some visibility to it, like literally, and then also like, you know, figuratively, either to yourself, like appearing to yourself and seeing yourself, or being seen by other people, or both.
Right.
And that's like, it's very scary because it means you have to take up space. And if you have learned to not take up space in order to survive, like that's a very difficult instinct to counter, even if it's like not actually a threat at the current moment.
Right. Jamie, you're taking this conversation and like I'm like, whoa, I'm like, we have to revamp all these questions.
I feel like this is a therapy session for me.
Oh my God.
See you next week, doctor.
Wow.
Taking up space. Yeah. That is in itself like a powerful thing. Oh, yeah.
It is so multi-layered. Like I'm just trying to picture social media posts or videos when I see, you know, like a white cis woman being super sexy and modeling and doing whatever. I don't have like, I kind of am like, yeah, okay, whatever, scroll but then when I see like a woman of color doing something similar, it like, I don't know, I kind of like it, like I get stuck on it. Like I have a different feeling. And I think it's exactly what you're saying about taking up space. And just like we're so used to seeing like whether it was Disney or the neighborhoods we were in or the popular girls in school, we were so used to seeing them celebrated, and it kind of became like a norm or accepted. And we didn't see a lot of cis women of color in the same type of space. So when I see it, I still have to figure out how I feel about it, but I just like, I stop more. Like it's just, you know, it was something that Tams and I even talked about when we first saw Sandra do her gua sha video. We were just like, whoa, who is this Asian person in this space that's so dominated by like the white wellness industry? So anyway, I'm just like, as I'm thinking about this and as you're sharing these things with us, Jamie, I'm like, whoa, this is a really, like it seeps into every aspect of our lives without us even realizing it. And with all the content that we are thrown at with social media, I'm just now going to start to pay attention more and like lean into how, like what I'm feeling about it. And I'll be curious to read how the comments are, you know what I mean? Like if one is like, you're so sexy, and another one is like, whoa, a little like confident much, or I don't know, like I have no idea, but I'm gonna start like paying attention to that more now that you shared that with us.
Go ahead, Jamie.
I love hearing that story because that one little post interrupted like whatever dominant narrative of beauty was happening for you. And that means it happened collectively, because this like social media is a collective experience.
Interruption is like such a good word, because I'm well, going back to like growing up in Southern California and then going to school in Washington, like I wonder how much of our perception of beauty and desirability is affected by what we are surrounded by. And so social media, I'm just much more interested in other people. Like I find myself like unfollowing a lot of accounts, and like I follow a lot of queer accounts because I love how queer people express their beauty and their desirability. And then lately I've been following a lot of people who are disabled, whether if they're deaf or just physically disabled. And then lately now, because I'm going through some weight stuff too, I have been following these awesome accounts where they're different bodies, bigger bodies, but showing different modifications with exercises and stuff. And it's like, I feel like every account like that, when when I do follow, it's like, it's an interruption. It's like reprogramming my brain. Like, this is actually normal. Like, this is what a body should look like. This is what beauty looks like. Like, it's vastly different. Like what you said, like going into the Korean spa. What I heard when you were talking about this is defining beauty of like, there's just such a vast difference. Like, there is no one type.
Yeah. I totally did the same thing that you did back when Tumblr was a thing.
Tumblr, yes.
Back when Tumblr was a thing, where I intentionally like only followed queer folks of color and trans folks of color, fat folks, like people of all different kinds of bodies, because I was just having a lot of dysphoria.
Mhm.
And like internalized like fat phobic thoughts
Mhm.
around like how my body should look. And I like all of this is like tied into like desirability, pretty politics too, right? Like
Right.
being a queer person of color, being someone who is not like, I don't identify with the gender binary, and I don't present in a way that's like very gendered most of the time, or read as gendered by other people rather.
Mhm.
And so it was like really getting to me when I couldn't find people to go on dates with that I felt like acknowledged my gender identity and were safe, but then also that I was attracted to. Like, it was like hard to find all of those things matching. And
Right.
like dating's fucking hard to begin with, like
It
even
sucks.
without all of these like more
Yeah.
complicated things coming into play. But then when you have all of these different layers of oppression that you're trying to navigate, it becomes even more complicated. So I was just like binging on like really sexy hot content from a lot of different people with a lot of different bodies with a lot of different
Mhm.
experiences, because our indoctrination is so complete, right? Like, it's in like all of our media, it's in conversations we have, it's like
Right.
inside of us. Like,
Mhm.
we are policing ourselves. We don't even need other people outside of us to police ourselves because the indoctrination is like so thorough.
Right.
So hell yes, like if you can control your media, you should.
Mhm.
Eat what's good for you.
Yeah. Is
Yeah.
being in Baltimore different? Is the culture, environment, people that you're with different than your experience on the West Coast? And has that like impacted your ideas of beauty?
It is, but I mean, I moved here during the pandemic, so I like don't go out.
Yeah.
I like don't really go out that much, except to go to work, or go grocery shopping or something. And so I just haven't had the same kind of social situations. I'm not really dating outside of my relationship right now. Yeah, so it's hard to tell.
Yeah. Oh
But
yeah.
But
my experience of Baltimore is that there's a lot of queer and trans folks here, and there's a lot of rad fashion that I get to see.
Mhm.
So I do enjoy that. Yeah, like Pacific Northwest can be kind of weird sometimes, where I'm like, why are you wearing your like 5-finger toe shoes
Oh,
to
God.
work?
You're
Like,
making me want to move back to the East Coast.
why are you always ready to go hiking?
Mhm.
Oh, I miss
Tamsin, you know what
that.
I'm talking
I
about. Like,
do.
what's happening with the fashion vibe?
I had to get rid of so many things just because it's like, it's just impossible to have it here on the West Coast. And like, that's what I miss. Like what I see fashion as. I mean, I grew up around a lot of drag queens too. So that's how I learned about makeup and fashion because my mom wasn't really present in my childhood. So I didn't learn it from her. And so that's how I learned about, like, when you talked about adorning yourself, that's what I learned. And then to me, it was this like playfulness. It was like dress up. And as a kid, I loved play dress up. Like my parents said I would change my outfit like 6 times a day, like just random stuff, you know? And that's how I still see, oh, I lost my way in the last couple of years of like, that's why I like putting on makeup and perfume and wearing certain clothes. And when I see things, and that's what I'm trying to get to, like, I really want to add some more playfulness into beauty. And as an adult, I think we lose that. We get too serious about shit, you know? Like, why can't you come out wearing like, oh, I have these awesome like 4.5-inch, like what is it? Michelle Pfeiffer from Scarface, kind of 70s golden heels. Yeah, so hot. And then I have no place to wear it, but I bought it and I still haven't worn them. But I was just looking at them yesterday and I was like, oh, I love these shoes. Like,
you need to put them on and then like wear them to go take the garbage out.
Yeah, or just in your own room, just for yourself.
I will tell you that
wear it for myself.
in quarantine, I actually wear way more makeup than I do out than I did before because I'm at home and I'm just like, I got no time except to love myself.
Oh, I love that.
I mean, I also do other stuff, but like I take time now to like really ritualize putting on makeup, putting on clothes that feel really good, doing my skincare. Like in Hilot, one of the really common medicines is actually topical oils. Like there's a lot of medicinal oils in Philippine medicine. And so like you use it for all kinds of stuff. You use it for pain, you use it for anointing the body, you use it for rituals. So that has, you can ritualize anything in your beauty routine, in your fashion routine. You can ritualize it and turn it into magic, turn it into something that is spiritual and emotional and significant to you.
That's so true. And it's, I mean, when I hear that, I'm like, that's so wise. I'm curious, bringing up Hilot, how you kind of just shared how there's a lot of oils involved and how you'll incorporate it in your own self-care and healing routine. So I want to hear a little bit more about that. And then also how you, of course, incorporate it as a service with your patients. If, I'd love, yeah.
So if I'm practicing magic or any kind of, we'll just call it magic just for ease. If I'm practicing magic and ritual and stuff like that, especially like drawing on my Hilot training, it's like anything can become a tool. Anything can become a tool for protection, for connecting to your ancestors. It really depends on your intention with using it and how much attention you give that object.
Right.
Like if you're charging it by putting it on your altar, if you're praying with it. And I will say that prayer can be lots of things. Like it doesn't have to be like a verbal like benediction, like you're going to church. Like prayer can be dance, prayer can be painting, it can be literally like rubbing your body with oils. Like all of these things can be a form of prayer. So for me, I don't do a ton of I do a little bit of like altar making, but not a ton. It is easier for me to do Hilot for myself if it's incorporated into my regular daily routine.
Okay. Can you share a little bit like what Hilot is for people who don't know what it is?
So Hilot is just a broad general term for traditional medicine from the Philippines, like pre-colonial. It existed pre-colonial but since colonization, it has also incorporated like folk Catholicism, and there's other different influences in it too. But it's a complete medical system, just like Chinese medicine is, where we they're like full spectrum healers originally. So working with herbs, working with body work, working with divination, and rituals. Our healers were also warriors. They were teachers. They were mystics. It was like a very multidisciplinary role in society. And there were also many different names, because in the Philippines, there's a lot of different tribal nations.
Yeah.
And so each of them had their own term for these healers. I use Babaylan. They're also Catalonan or Mombaki. So there are variations between the different groups. So
Is this something that you learned through your family?
This is something I didn't learn this through my family. My family is very, very Catholic. So this knowledge was not coming through them. I learned this through friends of mine who were interested in learning more about our ancestors. And then eventually that led me to going to the Philippines to actually study at the Hilot Academy of Binabaylan.
Oh, wow.
With my teachers, Lakay and Apu. I got to study with them right between when the volcano in Taal erupted in the Philippines, and then right before all the shit went on lockdown for COVID. So it was like January and February 2020.
Wow.
So I was one of the last group of students that was able to go there before everything was like, no more live in person.
And so, because there's a similarity between Chinese medicine and Hilot, and there's some elements, some of the similar elements too, right? When we learn about pulses or points or even herbs, we learn it very binary way: masculine pulse, feminine pulse, the mother-father relationship, right? But in Chinese medicine, a lot of traditional medicine, nothing is binary. Everything is dynamic. There's always yin within yang and yang within yin, and it's in constant like motion. And so I always find it interesting that we learn these binary terms. And so as an acupuncturist and Hilot practitioner, you work with a lot of non-binary and trans people. And so how do you understand concept of like these binary terms within these medicine? And like, how do you explain it to your patients?
I just don't conceptualize it as binary. I think of them more as relationships and as phases, because it's like we in acupuncture school, like we learn that like you need yang to generate yin, you need yin to generate yang. And I think that when that gets translated into Western culture, it becomes like yin versus yang.
Yes.
And it becomes like masculine versus feminine, which is actually like it's not actually reality. That's like socially constructed, right? Like you need these energies are both within each other, and they are like surrounding each other, circling each other. Like it's more of a dynamic than it is static states.
Right.
So once I explain that to folks, it's like I have to debunk that myth of like yin versus yang, and yin equals feminine and yang equals masculine. Like that's just not true. It's just not true. It really like sells short the idea of yin and yang, right? Like yin is also like substantial and material, and yang is like energetic and movement and all of these things. Like to just to like reduce it to masculine and feminine is really a disservice to the medicine and a disservice to reality.
Right.
I remember learning about yin yang concept, and it took me forever. Like I remember the chart, where it's like yin yang moving like this. I couldn't grasp like what my mind was like. I don't understand how these two things can happen at the same time, and you actually need these things to constantly be in movement.
Right. I think if we bring it into like the theories of Chinese medicine and of Hilot are all nature-based. So we just have to look at nature, right? Like if we are looking at night and day as being yin and yang,
Yeah.
like even though it's nighttime, it doesn't mean the sun went away. Even though it's daytime, it doesn't mean there's no moon.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Right.
that the presence of it has transformed.
Mm-hmm.
And the visibility of it has transformed, but you need them both. Like they're constantly cycling. Same thing with the seasons. Like you need winter, you need summer, but they're not oppositional.
Mm.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Does Hilot have a concept similar to yin and yang? Because I always had the impression that it was so unique to Chinese medicine. But I'm curious because a lot of people don't know too much about Hilot, if there is something equivalent within that medicine.
Um, there might be, just because there's so many different ways to practice, but it wasn't emphasized too much from what my teachers taught me. We definitely focused more on building relationships with nature and nature spirits. But I will say that like I do see where I see where like culturally there's going to be some exchange, just because there was so much culture that Chinese culture that influenced the Philippines from like centuries of trade. Like
Mhm.
I don't know if the concept of elements pre-existed like Chinese contact, or if that was something that was already, or if it came with the trade, with the merchant ships.
Right.
I don't really know, but
Mhm.
I mean, I suspect it was probably there before, just because the cultures were originally animist, and so we
Mhm.
believed that like spirits were, that there are spirits in everything.
Right. Yeah. So, and something too that I'm not familiar with within Chinese medicine, but I'm very curious about within Hulot is this Tava's divination and Atang connection with ancestors through food. So yes, share with us about these food rituals.
So atang, it just means offering, and it can be food. I do food as that's like my most common type of offering. That's probably not just mine, but that's one of the most common types of offering, because we practice ancestor veneration. And so we use food as an offering to placate spirits, to nourish our ancestors, to nourish the land. There's less of a there's like less separation between the spirit world and the human world culturally, and also like through this medicine. So like whenever I do a ritual, and I invite ancestors in for guidance or for healing, either my own ancestors or the person I'm working with, you don't just invite people over and like not feed them.
Oh my, I've been in houses where people invite me over and they're not going to offer me a drink or a
That's
snack.
because they're white.
Yes.
I wasn't going to say
gonna
that.
be like,
Yeah.
That's because they're white.
Or you come to my place and you don't bring it. Like I invite you to dinner and you don't
Yeah.
bring anything. I will
Yeah.
close the door. Like
It's weird.
it's so
I like
weird.
had to unlearn bringing shit to white people's houses, because then I was just always bringing them shit and there was no reciprocal relationship.
oh my God, I need to learn that.
Because then they're just like, oh, you're so generous. I'm like, but aren't you generous too?
It's so funny because when I moved into Seattle, I invited a friend. Again, we're no longer friends, but who's Asian, and I invited them to dinner, and like they didn't bring anything. And I was like, "Who raised you? Like, is it? West Coast Asians are really different than East Coast Asians, though."
But yeah, like if you're inviting over your venerated spirits, especially if you're asking them for a favor,
Yes.
and you're trying to build relationships with them, you need to make sure that they're comfortable. You need to be hospitable.
You don't want your ancestral spirits to be pissed off at you.
Exactly. So like you take that value that we have with our like living relatives, and it's just extended to our non-living relatives, to the land that we're on, to our neighbor. Like it's that cultural value runs deep, and it runs in all sorts of directions. So that's why we got to feed them.
Yeah. I want to take a turn in the questions for as we wrap up, but I was looking at your account and I love that you printed these new brochures a while back, and I love the title of it because it's Pins, Potions, and Trans Health, and I was like, oh, this is like the playfulness that I love, pins and potions, like, and then you talked about multidimensional concept within trans health, and like how medical interventions for transition, like surgery and hormones, are the most visible types of trans health, but trans people are multidimensional, and multidimensional is the word that we use to describe this podcast. We wanted to learn about beauty from so many different perspectives. And you also talked about how they deserve emotional and spiritual care, and it's not just on this fixation of like genital surgery or outward presentation. There's so much more deeper that they need care for. And so I'm curious to know, by working with the trans community, how, you're working on an emotional, spiritual, obviously physical level too. How does the impact of transitioning shape beauty and self-worth on a spiritual, emotional level?
I think that really depends. I think that really depends on the person. That's it's such a personal and intimate experience. But I can speak from, like what I have experienced, and it feels so fucking good to be aligned physically and spiritually and mentally and emotionally. Like the more you can come into yourself in whatever way that means to you, and sometimes that includes surgery, that might include hormones, whatever, then the more you can like take up your own space, take up your own, to really like claim whatever your inheritance is, to like to like be there with your gifts, and to be part of your community. And like obviously like that is not a choice that a lot of people are able to make because of transphobia and limitations around care. But it's like in my experience, it has been really challenging, where I knew that the way that I would want to present was going to be further away from so-called beauty standards. Because the more you are not conforming to the binary, the less you conform, the less beautiful you are to the status quo, like to most people, the less desirable you are, the less access that you have. Like pretty politics is a real thing. People are nicer to pretty people. Pretty people get a lot of
you
privilege.
Get higher salaries, you get promoted, even like professionally, it has an impact, and that impacts like where you are in your social status, and even little kids, they get treated differently in schools and teachers.
And so I had to make a choice to be in more alignment with myself and more comfortable in my body, knowing that I might lose a lot of social access. And I did.
Wow.
I lost some of it. What has shifted? Oh my God, I was in therapy like constantly. Like I've been in therapy almost like pretty regularly for like the past like 12, 13 years or something like that. Like what helps me was to be connected to community. Again, that is problematic for a lot of folks. They have a hard time accessing it. Changing my media consumption. Like even now, I almost only read books and watch TV with lots of BIPOC and queer and trans folks, made by BIPOC and queer and trans folks.
Yeah.
Let me clarify.
You gotta like clarify that last part.
Oh wait, what was I saying? I lost my train of thought. But anyways, like there was some choice around that. There was some choice to know that I would lose quantity of connections, and hopefully like it's a risk, and hopefully that becomes like deeper, more quality relationships, being my most authentic self.
So that's what you gained or was hoping to gain, intending to gain, but there was a big sacrifice or a letting go of things that society told you probably would be losing, and maybe you also probably personally experienced the shift in how you were treated or seen, or how friendships started to look, and the language that was being used around you, and maybe within your own family. So that takes a ton of courage and bravery, courage. So I'm curious.
Faith. It's like you don't know what the other side is going to look like.
Right.
Like I think about it, and it's like also I see it as a way of using your privilege. Like you had privilege and access to certain things that other folks might not have had, and you were using that privilege to like show up in this world. And so to me it's like, I don't know, I'm feeling like I bodily I feel fear just even thinking about this.
Yeah. And I mean like I didn't know if going through a medical transition was going to like mean I would lose my family. And they still struggle with, some of them still struggle with certain things around that. The interesting thing though is like this outer stuff, like the visible stuff to other people, was never as it was like never as intense feeling as like the internal processes I was going through. So it's just like always felt strange that people are like, oh my God, surgery, that's such a big deal. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, whatever. Like it's the inside stuff to be like vulnerable and to commit to like living your life in a certain way, to like living your truth. Like that, I was in years of therapy before getting into before medical transition in order to prepare myself. Like nobody sees that part.
Yeah.
Right.
And then afterward, I just saw this incredible short documentary at a film festival a couple of years ago, the Asian Film Festival in Seattle. And it was about this Asian doctor in New York City who specializes in trans surgery. And they were saying that, you know, they may receive some counseling before surgery, but there's nothing afterwards. And so he sees his patients struggling. They've got the surgery, right? Physically, they look like how they want to look, but emotionally, spiritually, there's no care. And they, you know, they end up like depressed or suicidal. And there is a high suicide rate, at least in this documentary, who's saying with post-surgery. And it's just so, but it's like so, you know, Western conventional medicine. Of course, I'm not going to like think about the aftercare that takes place other than like our tissue healing. You know, even then, there isn't a lot of support around that. And there's such a tie between scar tissues and Chinese medicine and the Shen and the consciousness and blood.
Well, and even beyond that, it's like if you are visibly like not conforming to a gender binary, like you can lose your job, maybe you won't get hired. Like people are facing like a whole array of issues. I'm specifically talking about folks who are transitioning in a way that means that they're not going to be read as cis. There's nothing wrong with folks who transition in a way that's binary, but that's you have access to different things. It's not the same experience. But it's like it is definitely a choice to be beautiful for oneself. At least in my experience, it was to choose to be beautiful for oneself versus choosing to be beautiful for other people. And that was hard, but it was also so awesome. And the recovery process for me was very beautiful. It was very communal. Like I had the whole spreadsheet. I have a Mars and Capricorn. had a whole spreadsheet with like all of the support that I needed. And I had a schedule of all my voluntary butlers who came and like walked my dog, like scrubbed my back in the shower, brought me food. And it's just like, wow, all these people showed up so that I could feel comfortable and sexy in my skin.
Mm-hmm.
And the care, it's like, it's not just like a superficial care of like, oh, you have no boobs now, like whatever. Like it's like nourishing your body emotionally, physically, like feeding you, people taking you shopping to like go get new clothes to fit your body. Like it's there's a lot of nuance in how our beauty can be supported in a communal way and how it becomes a communal experience. Because you're basically like giving birth to yourself.
Oh, I love that.
And I think that like if we are like, trans health is so much more than just the medical transition, right? Like it's trans health is any health issue that a trans person needs help with, right? You know, it's their back pain, it's their sciatica, it's their like, you know, twisted ankle. Like that is all trans healthcare if you are treating a trans person.
Yeah. Allergies.
Right.
Allergies, period pains, all of this.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it, like when we take when we have that scope of how we see people, when we care for them, when that is brought into supporting someone through transition, it's a whole different experience, because then we're not like, whoop, cutting stuff off and then kicking them out the door. They're held before, during, and after.
Oh, this is a perfect time to ask. You know, we started this podcast because we believe beauty is a birthright, but then we're like, so now what does that really mean? And, you know, as Chinese medicine practitioners, we're always thinking about this concept of immortality and legacy. And so you've kind of shared a little bit about legacy throughout this whole episode. And so we were wondering, like, what is the beauty legacy that you want to leave behind in this world?
I don't know. Hold on. Give me a second.
That's a big question.
That's a big question.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's like one particular thing that I would want to leave behind. I want to live in a way that's so authentically me that abundance is just like flowing out and like catching everybody. That like, if I'm like accessing my own beauty, that this is just like spilling out and everyone's getting like, everyone I get to come into contact with gets to, you know, like feel their own beauty.
I love that. It's like magical.
You know what came into my mind? It was when we first started this conversation, you were talking about the Korean spas and that community, that non-judgment, and just like this really healthy environment. I feel like if there was that type of a setting for trans people post-op to recover, like the things that you mentioned your friends doing for you and the care that you had, the back scrubbing, massage, groceries, whatever else, like a center that either could organize those things for others or provide that, or you could go into a type of Korean spa setting and be proudly trans. That's what seems so interesting to me too.
That is like a fantasy project in my head. I would love to have like a trans like wellness retreat center. I don't actually have any idea of how to make that happen, but that's like in my like 10-year
it doesn't have to be your legacy answer. I just like, as we were asking you, I'm like, but I have a really like cool idea that obviously you've already thought about.
No, we're like, I was like sharing it with you like mentally.
And you were also sharing it with the sponsors.
Exactly. Sponsor my trans wellness center and send me really cool makeup.
Oh, I love this. This is a perfect way to end everything. Thank you so much, Jamie, for spending this time with us. And like, I'm going to think about so much about our conversation today. Can you let our listeners know where they can find you? And if you have any upcoming stuff that we're all going to definitely put this all in the show notes, all your website and your handle and everything. But yeah, let everyone know where they can follow you.
So I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Patreon, all kinds of stuff. I have my own website, but I'll just give the one link so it simplifies it. I'm on Linktree / Jamee Pineda Healing Arts, and that is spelled linktr.ee/Jamie JAMEEPINEDA Healing Arts, and that has all my info on there. As far as what's going on, I have another QT BIPOC Qigong course that is going to be starting probably in June, in the summer, and it's going to be the Tiangan set, so like heavenly stem. I like every other month or so I run a QT BIPOC Qigong course virtually, so folks can join wherever they're at. And those are super, super fun. I'm also doing in-person treatments in Baltimore now for acupuncture and body work at Fruit Camp, and I still am doing virtual Hilot readings as well.
Yeah, I got a Hilot reading, everyone. It was incredible. I still think about it. Wow. Romantic friendship dates. That's and Jamie said he would take me on a romantic friendship date. So I was like, I've been thinking about that lately. And also, you have a podcast yourself where you get to interview incredible people.
It's the Decolonizing Medicine Podcast. So yeah, that's what we talk about. We talk about decolonizing medicine, and it's mostly other healthcare practitioners, but it's also folks who experience healthcare as well.
Well, thanks, Jamie, for
thank you so much.
All right, bye everyone.